I've been wanting to have you on the show for a long time, especially earlier in this assault on Gaza, because of what it seemed like it could spark. And about a month ago or so, it felt like, oh no, Hezbollah is going to get involved, and this is going to be this is going to be wider than just Gaza. And it hasn't really materialized like that. Maybe I'm not understanding the full, and I know we can talk about the other sort of ways that it has materialized, but let's take things for parts. Actually, I apologize. We're gonna go all over the place, but specifically about Hezbollah, right? Which is a militant organization, but a political organization inside of Lebanon, in southern Lebanon, and has successfully, using force, actually prevented Israel or stopped Israel from incursions onto southern Lebanon. Can you explain a little bit of their role and why we haven't seen more, or what you think that calculation is?
So first of all, I think you're quite right that a lot of us had that worry early on that this would quickly expand. And thankfully, that has not happened. However, there's 2 points on that. The first one is that to a large extent, that may very well have been as a result of pure luck. Take one example, for instance. On October 26th, there was a major drone attack by an Iraqi militia against the Erbil air base in northern Iraq. They managed to get through all of the air defenses of the US base, hit the barracks on the second floor, 5 a.m. in the morning, but malfunctioned, did not explode, and as a result, no one died, but probably would have killed 24 American soldiers otherwise.
Wow.
Had happened, then we would be in a very, very different situation today. And it probably would have not just been a regional escalation, but the US would also have gotten dragged into the war because the attack was on the US and the US would have retaliated and then it would have sparked. So
we would have gone back into Iraq. That would have been fun.
Well, we are already in Iraq. We have about 2,500 troops there. We have another 900 to 2,000 troops without any legal authorization by Congress in Syria as well. But we also have sent a very clear signal to the Iranians that if any of these militias who are connected to Iran but may not necessarily act on orders from Iran all the time, that if they kill an American, we will retaliate against Iran. And if we retaliate against Iran, yes, then we will have a regional war. So in some ways, it's just pure luck that it hasn't happened. The other factor, though, is to take into account is that now we're actually entering a phase in which the risk of escalation actually is dramatically going up because of two different arenas. On the one hand, you have what's going on in the south of the Red Sea and Yemen, with the Houthis attacking ships. The US is now putting together a coalition of countries to safeguard sea lanes in the Red Sea. Curiously enough, not a single country that actually is on the Red Sea is in that coalition. And only one Arab country, tiny Bahrain, whose contribution is minimal. And I think that tells us something about the lack of diplomatic pull that Biden has in the region right now.
So they're not even talking to the people in the states in the region.
Well, I mean, I think the Biden administration worked very hard to get Saudi Arabia and UAE to sign on to it, and they didn't, because it would be so dramatically unpopular in those countries, and it would add a tremendous amount of risk. If that coalition had shot down a Houthi drone or struck against the Houthis in Yemen, the Houthis already made it clear they're going to start attacking Saudi and Emirati oil fields. So again, the risk and the triggers for an escalation is very, very significant. And if I could make one last point on the Houthis, the approach of the administration is, in my view, is really quite. I have a hard time wrapping my head around why they think this would work. Because on the one hand, we have a situation in which the Houthis are threatening the sea lanes, an escalation, and it's going to have global repercussions. I can definitely see a justification to move troops there and show deterrence, et cetera, to stop that. However, we also know that the reason they're doing this is because they want to get a ceasefire in Gaza. They were not doing this before this war, and they've made it very clear that they will continue to do it until there is a ceasefire. So the option we have is to push for a ceasefire or escalate, and we're choosing to escalate. Doesn't make any sense to me. The easiest way of actually calming down the situation is actually to press the Israelis for a ceasefire. They've killed enough people in Gaza at this point. There's no real prospect of truly destroying Hamas. Even if they manage to do so, it will come at the expense of a massive amount of civilian deaths, which may not be an issue to the Israeli leaders, but it will be an issue for the United States because it is killing our international global standing right now.
Yeah.
But also, even if they succeed, we will probably have Hamas 2.0 pretty soon, as we did in Iraq and other places. So it's a goal that is not attainable. And even if it's attainable, we're just going to end up in a worse situation. But instead of doing that, we think that the solution is to move more troops to the region, escalate further, add more risk. And it just doesn't make any sense.
So the new troops that are being moved to is to protect the cargo and ships moving through the Red Sea against the Houthi rebels or fighters. Now, what's interesting, so yeah, that's terrible. That's a bad idea. But also it is interesting that you're not seeing, the attack on Erbil, right? These are militants. Houthi rebels are militants. I mean, they're stateless actors. They are not
the
governmental
Iraqi and Syrian militias are militias.
Right.
In the case of the Houthis, is a rebel group that essentially has taken control over Yemen. They're not the recognized government of Yemen, but they're more acting like a government than the militias are doing.
Yeah. And so, I mean, what's interesting, and I'm curious what you think, or what, in terms of, there is a lore about Israel that it is surrounded by enemy states and they all are going, they want to, attack and like wipe it off the map. And it's like, not really. I mean, there's like, you're not seeing an invasion from neighboring states, you're not seeing threats from Egypt. You're not seeing threats from Jordan. You're not seeing threats from, I mean, there's calls to, negotiate. I remember the King of Jordan has been pretty vocal. There's worries out of Egypt, but like this idea that all of these states are somehow and countries are gonna like come to the defense of Palestinians. That's not the case. And I'm curious why. And also, maybe do the Abraham Accords have anything to do with this? Does the normalization of relations with Israel between like Saudi Arabia and Israel, does that have anything to do with all this? Or what, how can you explain that to folks?
In the case of the Emiratis, I think it does. In the case of the Bahrainis, it does, in the sense that they did normalize with Israel. And as a result, putting real pressure on the Israelis is not much of an option for them. In the case of some of the others, like, so for instance, Jordan normalized a long time ago, but that was actually part of a real peace deal that actually had compromises, concessions to the Palestinians, etc. The normalization the Israelis did with the UAE had really nothing but lip service to the Palestinians. And that was, in my view, part of the reason why we are in this current situation, because the Trump administration bought the Israeli line, which is, you don't have to make a deal with the Palestinians. You don't have to address their issue. You don't have to think that they have to come out of occupation. Instead, let's just integrate Israel with some of the Arab states in the region, build an anti-Iran coalition, have direct flights between Ben Gurion and Dubai, and that will solve and create peace in the region. And what that does is that it sends the signal to the Palestinians, after 20 years of this so-called peace process, it's delivered nothing for them. Yeah. And now we're not even pretending that it's going to deliver something for them. Instead, as Jared Kushner said, we're moving beyond the Palestinian issue. When you do that, reality is, at some point, that conflict is going to return to violence. Mm-hmm. When it would happen, how it would happen, no one could predict. That it would happen in this way, probably no one at all could predict, but that it would happen, I think, was quite clear. Because otherwise we're thinking, yes, you can keep several million people under humiliating occupation indefinitely, with no promise of statehood, no promise of actually getting out of that, and that will be manageable and it will not lead to violence. That's an insane assumption. That's the assumption that the Trump administration adopted when they pursued the Abrams Accord and actually instituted it. And that's the assumption that the Biden administration accepted when they took the Abrams Accord even further, because they were working so hard to get the Saudis to accept it as well.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/bitchuationroom. Do